In this video, I'm going to show you how I created the download icon that's seen throughout the book. It's very simple to make, and it's a great example of how I love using Flash to create UI elements. All right, so the simplest way to get started, right? Let's create, you can see I have all my layers here, and I'm just going to use this, keep this up here on the stage just to use as reference. I'm going to create a whole new layer, and let's start by grabbing a tool, right? Oval tool will work perfectly for this. All right, we can make a square button, we can do a whole bunch of things, but I'm going to stick to the oval tool. And first thing I want to do is let's talk about the oval tool here. I want to basically create a fill. As you can see, I'm not using any outlines or anything like that. Right, I'm going to create, let's make this blue. Let's make a blue button just to be different. All right, I'm going to turn off the stroke color because we don't want that. I have object drawing mode on. You can have that on or off. It's up to you. I'm going to leave it on, okay? Holding down the shift key, I'm going to draw my circle. Boom. And holding down the shift key constrains its proportions, so it's a perfect circle every time, but it's a flat circle. I want to add a bit of depth, right? Because I want it to feel a little bit more rounded, a little bit shiny. So all we need to do is create a simple gradient. So here's my color panel. I'm going to use a drop down here, go to linear gradient. All right, so I've got this previous gradient that I'd use for something else, which I'm not going to need for this. What we do want to create the base gradient for this icon is a linear gradient, right, with 3 different swatches. And these swatches are all going to have an opacity of 100%. So let's first take care of that. And let's grab another blue color here. There we go. So that's 100%. Let's grab blue again here, make sure that's 100%. Let's grab the same color blue. Sometimes I'll just start off with the same color blue throughout. Now I can start to manipulate these individual swatches to produce my linear gradient effect. So now you can see, well, maybe you can't see. Let's turn off a few layers so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see how in the original icon, in the original graphic, that the linear gradient itself, right from top to bottom, it's very light at the very top, and then about 2/3 of the way down it gets to its darkest value, and then at the very bottom it's kind of a value that's in between the darkest and lightest value. Okay, so what this does is it suggests that there's light coming from the top and also from the bottom. It kind of gives it a convex kind of feel. Okay, so to create this, let's go make sure we have linear gradient selected. I had clicked on my object, and it had forced it back to a solid color. So let's go make sure we're at linear gradient here. We say have 3 swatches. This one's a little bit off center. All right, so what I want to do is this is going to be the color that corresponds to this darkest shade here. So using my slider, there's a couple of ways I can mix this color, but I want it to be very dark. I can go here within the color range here in this big window, or just use this slider here, add a little bit more black to it. And that's about right. Now you'll see, because we have the object selected, that it's getting updated in real time, and also that our linear gradient is right now going in the wrong direction. Don't worry about that. We'll deal with that in a second. It's very simple to fix. So now I want this color, the swatch on the far left of my linear gradient inside the color panel, to be the lightest color. So let's make it a little bit brighter. I'm going to slide that up a little bit, just like that. And this color maybe just a little bit darker. Make it a little bit more subtle. All right, that works. Now there's a couple of ways to now change the orientation of the linear gradient inside the shape. We can grab the free transform tool, and we can actually rotate this if we wanted to, and we could be done. But I'm going to undo that and show you another way, because it's all about how you want to work and your own workflow. What I've done is hit F on my keyboard, right? But if you didn't see that, I'm going to actually click down here. What F does is it's a shortcut key to the gradient transform tool, which is in your toolbox, toolbar rather, about the 3rd icon down. And if you click on an existing gradient, whether it's radial or in this case linear, you'll be presented with some handles that will allow you to edit the gradient. So here I want to grab this handle, which allows me to rotate it, and I can rotate the gradient itself. So now we have our basic shape. Now what I would like to do is next I'd like to just create the drop shadow for this. There's a couple of ways to do this. One is creating a whole new shape and turning it into a drop shadow, but the easiest way, the most optimized way, is to convert this by going up to modify and selecting convert to symbol. All right, and let's just make sure it's a movie clip because we're going to apply some filters to it. You can't apply filters to graphic symbols, just movie clip symbols. Let's name it something like highlight, drop shadow, whatever you want to name it. All right, so now, since now that I've got it selected and it's converted to a, so now that I've got it converted to a movie clip symbol and it's selected, I can go into the properties panel. All right, and what I can do is, let's not show what we don't want right now. We can go to filters, and in the bottom left corner of the filters category is the add filter button. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to go to drop shadow. And you can see how the drop shadow now has been created. And we can alter this. If it's too strong, the default strength is 100%. We can pull that back a little bit using this hot text slider. And you can see it. You can see the drop shadow update in real time. Right? So it's applying a bit of transparency to it. We can add a little bit more blur. And we can also change the distance. Right now, the default is 5 pixels. We could set it to 0, which means the distance it'll be centered right on it, or right underneath it, so to speak. So we can give it a nice soft kind of drop shadow effect like this if you want. But if you do want to offset it a little bit, you just play with the distance, like so. All right, so now the angle's at 45 degrees, which is, again, the default. If our light source is coming from directly above, we might want that to change. Let's drag it a little bit here to the right. Let's say 90 degrees. So now the drop shadow feels a little bit more realistic. There, that works. All right, so that's done. Now what I want to do is, let's turn on some of these old layers here, is create this highlight. This one right here, this top shape here. This is key in making, that classic iOS glass plasticky kind of look, right? By adding a big highlight to something. So I want to basically use the same shape as this, and there's no need to recreate the wheel. So I'm going to copy this. I'm just right-clicking over it. I'm going to copy it, but I'm going to create a new layer first. And let's paste it. I'm going to actually paste it in place. I'm also going to break it all apart. Let's just make it a crazy color for now, just so for illustration purposes, just to show you. So we've got this shape that we just created from the existing shape. What we want to do is turn it into this. So let's place it back where it was. And if you notice, the highlight is a little bit smaller than the original shape. So grab the free transform tool. So grab the free transform tool, select the shape. I'm going to hold down Shift, and I'm also going to hold down the Option key. Shift, again, constrains its proportions. Option key will force it to scale based on the center point. So make it just a little bit smaller. Let's blow this up just a little bit bigger to make it clearer. So you can see we want to make it a little bit smaller than the original shape. Now, I've made sure all other layers are locked so I don't disturb anything else that we've done. Let's move this over just a little bit. Perfect. Using the black arrow key, which is the selection tool, I'm going to click and drag. I want to select about the lower half of this shape. Okay, you can see how just the lower half of this shape is now selected. The top half is not. If I hit the delete key, it disappears. It's gone. So now, again, using the same tool, I can grab the bottom edge of this shape and pull it down just a little bit. Perfect. But the orange color is not going to work. It just doesn't work as a highlight. So let's go back to the color panel here, and I'm going to grab linear gradient. And before we destroy the previous gradient we made, I'm just going to quickly add that as a swatch. You never know if we might need it again. So now what I want to do is double click here and grab white. We only need 2 swatches for this, 2 colors. So I'm going to just literally grab, and so I'm going to click and drag the third swatch here and just grab it and release outside of the color mixer panel, and it'll just disappear. Again, double click this second swatch and turn it into white. Double click the second swatch and choose white. And now what I want to do is bring down the alpha all the way to 0. So now this gradient goes from complete pure opaque white down to complete transparent white. All right, so this is good enough for now. Grabbing the bucket tool, I'm going to now fill by clicking in this shape. And now what I want to do is there's a couple of ways to manipulate the direction of the linear gradient. Well, as I mentioned before, you can grab the gradient transform tool, click and rotate. But another cool way to do this, let me just undo what I just did, okay, is to, using the, with the gradient selected, right, as you can see here, it is selected as my fill color. If I click and then drag the bucket tool in any direction, that's the direction that the gradient fill will go in. That's the direction the linear fill will go in. That's the direction the linear fill will be applied. Okay, if I hold down Shift key, it'll constrain. It will constrain the direction, okay, to 45-degree angles, just like that. So we want the highlight to go from the brightest white from the top down. So let's go in the opposite direction by clicking and going up like that. Now I like to see a little bit more of this bottom edge. So now this is perfect to grab the gradient transform tool and make it a bit wider than the actual shape itself. So something like this. It's a little bit subtle, but it works. So there, you've got that shape pretty much right where we want it. And now the only thing left to do is add some kind of graphic. It could be anything you want. It's totally up to you. If it's a download button, then a downward facing arrow works. If it's an on or off button, you could have the word on or off, or it doesn't matter. So for this example, I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. I'm going to grab white as my opaque color here, pure white, no stroke selected, and I'm going to hold down Shift again, constrain this to a perfect square. I've created a new layer. Just want to make sure you saw that. I do things rather quickly, so I just want to make sure you saw that I created a new layer. And I locked all the other layers, so I'm not going to ruin anything. Right, hold down Shift, create a perfect circle. Okay, grab the free transform tool, and I'm going to rotate this just a quarter turn. So I've created a diamond shape. Okay, now let's break it apart. I'm going to hit Command B, make it. You don't have to do that. There's a couple of different ways, but I like just working on the main stage. I'm going to break it apart. Then I'm going to click and drag again and select the top half of this shape and hit Delete key. And hit the Delete key. So now I've got a downward facing arrow. If you prefer, grab the free transform tool again. I'm holding down the Option key, all right, so that my changes are symmetrical. And manipulate it into the shape I want. And there you have it. So if we wanted to add just a little bit more depth to this arrow, as you can see, there's a little bit of a ridge or suggestion of a ridge. So to do that, I'm going to grab the ink bottle tool or hit S on your keyboard, okay, and then grab a stroke color. For this, just so you can see it more clearly, I'm going to grab red and click anywhere inside of the shape. And it's going to apply a stroke, as you can see, to the outer edge of my shape. Now, using the selection tool, which is the black arrow, if I just click once on a segment, on a stroke segment, it's going to select just that segment. If I double click, it's going to select all the other segments that are actually attached to it. So it's a great way to select an entire stroke around a complicated object. This object is obviously not that complicated, but still, it's a lot easier than clicking once, holding down the Shift key, and then clicking 2 more times on each stroke. At the end of the day, just double clicking on the stroke itself will select them all. It's much quicker and easier. So now with just the stroke selected, using the arrow keys, you can kind of just nudge this a little bit down to the right, like that. Perfect. Now grab the bucket tool or hit K on your keyboard. I'm going to choose a gray color and fill it in right here, right? Like just how I did it right there in between the stroke and the edge of the fill. Now, again, repeat the double clicking of the stroke to select the entire stroke, hit the Delete key, and now we have the suggestion of like a bevel, of an inside beveled edge for this shape. So that's how I created the download graphic that you see in the book.